Are you interested in stories of action and adventure? If so, I recommend checking out my episode-based book series, The Demon Slayer Sidekick, on Kindle Vella. The first 3 episodes are free to read, and new ones drop every single week. That's all I have to say, and now, onto the video. Hello everybody! JGC Anime here. Today, we are here to review I got a cheat skill on another world to become unrivaled in the real world too, or Isekai de cheat skill wo te ni shita ore wa genjitsu sekai wo mo muso suru level up wa jinsei wo keta. I probably said that wrong. It was a really long title, but we're just gonna roll with it. So, how does the story of this series start? Basically, it all starts when a little pudgy guy named Yuya ends up getting bullied quite harshly during his final year of middle school. And during the 3-month time break, he ends up stumbling upon this old door left by his grandfather. And when he goes inside, he learns it was sent to another world. So, spending time there, he slowly gains some different skills throughout the whole break before the start of the high school years. And it just so happens that all those skills and things he learns get sent to the real world once he comes back, as well as now he's like super buff and stuff. So now he's spending time in between the worlds, just going on adventures and showing off just how overpowered he is. And yeah, that's the basic starting premise. I don't know if that was good or not, but we're just gonna roll with it. So, in terms of spoiler-free thoughts, it's okay. I wasn't even gonna be really checking out the series, to be honest with you. I originally was not interested at all. I thought the art style was kind of off-putting. In fact, I really didn't like the art style that much. But after a while, I finally sucked it up and thought, you know what? I like the way this kind of describing itself. It sounds like a really interesting concept, so I'm gonna give it a watch. And it's alright. It's alright. I wouldn't say it's necessarily fantastic, but I did enjoy myself for a fair amount of it. There are some complaints I have, but I can go over most of those in the spoiler section. But in terms of normal complaints, there's not like too many I can go into right now, but some things I can say is sometimes the story really doesn't have much going for it. Like, whenever the main character in this story is doing menial, like, normal tasks that normal people struggle with and he's just kind of doing it with ease, those are fun. But then you have the amount of moments of damsels in distress. What do I mean by this? Basically, in this story, there's a lot of damsels in distress in a lot of situations. Like, there's constant, which if you don't know what that means, it means somebody saving a girl who's in danger. And usually there's one or two in an OP series trying to get the main character to show off his stuff to girls. It usually exists to kind of introduce the girls to the main protagonist or maybe even fall in love with him and stuff like that. This show seems to really love that because throughout the entire season, there are so many moments where the main protagonist is saving somebody. It's 90% of the time a girl. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's pretty much all girls that he saves. And it's just, it baffles me how you could have so many moments like that in one series. And it definitely kind of ruined it a little bit for me. In fact, it's so frustrating because it happens in pretty much every single episode. Pretty much every single episode it happens. And it gets on my nerves really quickly since I don't hate the main character. I think the main character is actually a pretty cool dude. That is to say, Yuya. He's not an especially, like, unique protagonist or anything, but I do find his very kind attitude really nice, especially considering that he's been bullied his whole life throughout, according to the story, and seeing him still be a very good person is very nice to me. I do like seeing that in his personality. But the people that he surrounds himself with, I'm really not a fan of it. I go over most of them in the spoiler section, but what I want to talk about right here now is probably the main love interest of the entire story, Kaori. I hate this girl. I can go more into why in the spoiler section, but everything she does, even though she's not a super bad person, she's literally just one of the most kind characters in the series. I hate this girl. I, again, could talk about that later, but she is one of the most frustrating characters in this entire story because she feels so unnecessary. There are so many moments where she's part of this plot, she's part of the story, and she doesn't need to be there. And I'm just sitting there thinking, why? Why is she here? Why is she doing this? Why is this happening with her? Why is she so important to the plot? And I know the only reason why is because they're trying to set her up as the main love interest. And that gets really on my nerves because she has no personality. And it's just like, I don't know, she just doesn't have anything or that makes me want to see her get together with our protagonist Yuya. It's just, I really can't stand how little she really plays a role in anything. And she's meant to be this main love interest, as I said before. So yeah, I hate her. Again, I can talk about that more in depth in the spoiler section, but moving on from that from now, in terms of the overall plot for the series, it's, as I said before, it's okay. I wouldn't say it's especially unique or interesting. In fact, I dare say it's kind of uninteresting, as they're always trying to do this thing or that, and it's always kind of conflicting, especially since there are so many moments in this anime where it's like an intense action scene going on, but because they don't have the budget to actually animate those action scenes, they just have the characters go through like a fade in, fade out effect. Like how in these reviews, you always see the images fading into the next image. But in this anime, they basically do that every 2 frames to make it mimic movements. And it just reminds me of this one little YouTube short I did, where I literally, just to make it look like the characters were moving, would fade in and fade out. That's the kind of vibe I was going for. And when I see an actual anime doing it, that kind of got me a bit annoyed, because it didn't really feel like there was actual movement behind the scene. But yeah, the story itself overall, not exactly anything special. In fact, sometimes it felt really odd with the direction they were trying to go with things, especially with what they do with a lot of the main villains in the show, which I'll talk about in a bit. I don't like how everything was executed. If I had to give a few positive things about the show, I'd probably have to say the CGI at some parts doesn't actually look that bad. There is a lot of CGI, and sometimes it looks god-awful. But there are other times where it actually looks pretty well, because it blends well with the main character's design. I really like how sometimes that does work in that favor. Like how there are moments where I see the CGI and I'm like, okay, yeah, that is CGI, but honestly, it doesn't look that bad. But that's only during specific moments. Most of the time, it does look pretty bad. And while I do like a lot of elements of this show, the way they're executed in this is just not it. It's just, it feels so generic, so bare bones. And plus, half the time, one of my other small complaints is that a lot of the time, Yuya just kind of gets stuff handed to him. There are times where he'll literally just have stuff handed straight to him, which I can talk about again. A lot of stuff in the spoiler section, but he literally has so much stuff that's just handed to him at the beginning. It's not the case later on, but early on, it's just like there's so much being handed to this dude. And it can get kind of annoying at times, but yeah. That's all I can really say without spoiling anything, so we're just gonna hop into the spoiler section now. Here's the timestamp to when the spoilers end. If you have seen the show, I'd recommend sticking around to hear my thoughts, because you should skip to the end so you don't get spoilers. But again, if you haven't seen it, I recommend sticking around to hear my thoughts. So yeah, I'm gonna count down from 5, and we're going to enter the spoiler section. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so quickly going back to what I meant about the main villains of the show. The main villains kind of suck. Just straight up, I'm gonna say it. The main villains kind of suck. The first ones aren't too bad, which are Yuya's siblings, who have been bullying him his whole life, where he ends up redeeming them, and after they try to destroy the school and kidnap Kaori, he ends up redeeming them by helping them out, and it's not bad. It's actually not a bad ending to that. But then you get to the other world, because the main villains for the rest of the season are in that other world. And the other 2 main villains are a prince who is the brother of this other character called Princess Lexia, but we'll go over her in a bit. And the other is this archer girl who goes by the name of Yuri, who they're not that good. For one, I don't really understand the whole prince motivation. Basically, he's trying to kill his sister and his father to take the throne, and then when he's put in court after being captured, he then says, these are the scars caused by the princess, which all this kind of feels out of nowhere, but it's there. He's like, all these scars caused by his sister, and even though those wounds would heal, after that, he'd start feeling more magical energy, and it would cause those wounds to happen again. And I'm just sitting there thinking, okay, so it means that no matter what you do, this guy can't be redeemed. He'll probably just have to die or something and move on. But no, then Yuya just walks in, pours some healing potion on him, and then he's just like, oh, I'm okay. All right, I'm good now. I'm sorry, what? Please explain. Please explain to me how he's good now. Please explain how the heck this man is good now. It literally baffles me. Like, he's going through all these struggles, all these frustrations, and it's resolved and redeemed within no time at all. Man, this is like final season of Steven Universe levels of ridiculous redemptions. It's just like, I just can't be bothered in understanding what the heck was going through all this. What was going through the writer's head thinking, yeah, we need to redeem all these villains. It's the same thing kind of with Yuri, who I thought was just going to be, because her whole thing is that the person who taught her bow, some kind of like divine archer, ends up dying after humans betrayed them, and now she swears war on all humans everywhere. And then after her powers are taken away, she just kind of loses care and revenge and ends up going to Yuya's world and enrolling at the same school as him somehow, despite that's meant to be like a prestigious school or something. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. And for some reason, they really try to redeem those other two villains when it just doesn't make much sense. Like, why? Why would you do that? Maybe I'm misremembering things, but that just feels like it makes no sense whatsoever. And I just feel like the villains didn't really work in this show. They really didn't feel like villains at all. They felt very awkward and anticlimactic to watch, especially since the one I mentioned before, Yuri, has practically no build-up to her character. She has very minor little pieces of build-up, but very minimal, like very little. Only bits and pieces, and then she just kind of shows up in the last episode and gets defeated, even though I thought she may be built up as the next big threat for the show after the other two threats. But no, already resolved within half an episode. And the worst part of it all is we're going to follow this in with Kaori. I mentioned before that Kaori is a terrible love interest. I hate her. I really hate her. And it's not because of what everyone might think is like, oh man, you just don't like girls with no personality. Actually, no, that's actually right. That is the truth. She has no personality. I hate her because she has no personality. I don't know where I was going with that before, but I think she has no personality. She has nothing to make her a main love interest. Literally the whole time, she has done nothing. She has no personality, and the worst part of it all is that she's literally built up as the main, like, love interest. She's built up as this big, nice love interest for Yuya, and yet she literally plays no role. Literally in the finale, she just ends up visiting and entering Yuya's house without his permission, and just goes into the other world to find he's fighting Yuri, and I just sit there thinking, what is her point here? And that's just it. She has no point. She literally has no point being there. Literally all she does is see Yuya fighting monsters and being a battle warrior, and that's all that she's there for, just to watch him fight. And it just baffles me, like, what was her point of being there? She literally does nothing. And this might just be a bunch of me rambling here, but I really hate pretty much every time she's on screen because she always just will wind up in some scenario where she has to be saved by Yuya. She literally is the definition, like the textbook definition of a damsel in distress. She literally never does anything else. Like, I can think of at least 4 instances in the show where he has to save her. The first is the obvious one, the first episode where he ends up standing up to people who are trying to mess with her, and, you know, that's fine. But then you have later on where she ends up meeting with him again, and where she's about to be kidnapped by his siblings, and he saves her again. And that should be fine as well. But then after that, she runs into him while he's taking a walk with his new dog, and a guy steals a purse before hearing that Kaori say she's gonna call the police, and then she tries to stab her, and Yui has to save her again. And then after that, I don't know if that was after that or before that, but then after that, or maybe before that, I don't know, she ends up getting in a fire with her friends, and he has to save her then too! It's just like, she's just nothing without Yuya as a main character. She literally does nothing. She does nothing for the story. She literally just acts as a thing to give Yuya motivation. She has nothing else. She has nothing. And it just gets on my nerves so much. I just can't stand her character because she doesn't add anything to the plot. You could literally replace her with another generic character and nothing would change. Nothing about her in particular is interesting. She has no personality, and the fact that she is the main love interest grinds my gears so much. I genuinely dislike her. And the thing is, it's not bad to have a main love interest in a story, but I would appreciate if that main love interest at least had a personality. Like, for example, while it's not a perfect example, we have both the assassin who Yuya bonds with, as well as the Princess Lexia, I think that's her name. Those two have decent personalities. They're still not super interesting, but they have more than be a damsel in distress. Like, when it comes to the assassin, whose name I cannot remember right now, she literally tries to do all the things on their own, and she just has to be saved by Yuya once. After that, I don't think she has to be saved by him more than one more time. But overall, she can handle herself quite fine. I think her name was Luna. But basically, she could handle herself fine. She was strong enough to be able to handle herself and do things, and her bonding with Yuya was actually quite nice. I think that was one of the more enjoyable parts of this show. And the princess, well, she is the generic stereotype of the girl who's obsessed with the MC, trying to get together with him and stuff like that. It's better than having no personality at all, like Kaori. It's just, I would have taken the princess over Kaori any day. And the frustrating part is, I don't even enjoy the fantasy elements that much. If anything, this kind of goes against what I thought the show would be about. How I thought the show would go is the main character finds this isekai world, ends up going inside of it, and time moves differently there, so he gets more buff, you know, actually improves himself and gets stronger, and then when he comes back, things are different. But, you know, that's not the case. I thought time would move differently there, and he'd be able to show up the next day at school and actually be strong. But no, it turns out the other world moves at the same time frame, and so we aren't going to go the way I was hoping it would go, where we would kind of flash back to his previous adventures and stuff like that. It's just, it definitely went in a direction I wasn't expecting, but not exactly in a good way. Because I've seen shows where things go away I thought they would, and they don't actually go that way. Like, for example, when I heard the plot for Iruma-kun's Season 3, I thought it really wouldn't have anything worth watching, and I was just kind of going into it expecting more fun Iruma adventures. But then no, it actually ended up being really good. It took me by surprise and actually created a really interesting story for me to follow. This ended up being super disappointing with its concept, and while I do like the idea behind it, it just wasn't that good. And yeah, the plot is very lacking, and I definitely feel like this is one of the weaker shows I've checked out recently. And as much as I complain, I will admit I did enjoy it, especially when we saw him just do day-to-day life stuff with his abilities in the normal real world. When he does that, you know, like catching fish in the lake and stuff like that, it's fun. I enjoy it. Seeing him use those abilities just for day-to-day life is much more fun than seeing him have to save the next damsel in distress, because there's so many of them in the show for some reason. He literally just saves a girl from a soccer ball and she's automatically obsessed with him. It's just, I feel like the moments where he's just kind of doing day-to-day stuff is probably when things are at their best. And it's because of these moments that it makes me upset that this is what we kind of got with the show. An action adventure that has some slice of life elements inside of it that could have been good, but ended up being a massive disappointment. And that's why I kind of feel frustrated watching the show, especially since there's actually a lot of really fun characters to watch. For example, there's this one character that appears in the series, and he's not a big character. He's literally just this character called Akira, and he doesn't do much for the plot, but he's just so much fun to watch. Like, I really enjoy how he kind of, even though he's the butt of the joke, he's still so much fun to watch, and I really enjoy him on screen because of his dramatic personality that makes him really fun to watch. So, yeah. Quickly going back to Kaori one last time, I discussed before that there were multiple moments where Kaori just frustrated me, but I think the absolute worst has to be when Yuya introduces her to the other world. I didn't want her to go to this other world. I didn't think she was going to go to this other world, but not only does she randomly find it, rather than being like, oh, it's just a picture or something, Yuya's like, okay, this girl that I just kind of know, I'm just going to tell her about how I found this fantasy world where I grew super OP. Like, dude, I thought this was meant to be some secret that you were trying to keep or something. Was this not? Because you told her really fast. It's just, oh man, this is just turning into me hating Kaori, and I just, this whole season was kind of a mess for me. This whole show was a mess for me, and I don't want to hate it, but there are so many elements to it that really drag the show down. Though, I did enjoy my ride for the most part. The first, like, 1 to 10 episodes were actually quite interesting. I really enjoyed them, but then when we got to near the end, where the last 2 main villains were dealt with pretty quickly, with some rather awkward and anticlimactic fight scenes, including this one moment where they're still trying to find the prince, and because they need to save animation, just have characters talk while panning across some grass. There's just some weird moments in this that really don't sit right with me. It's just, the show was not that good, and I really don't think I want to check out a second season. This show was not interesting enough to keep me invested, and I really wish that a concept like this had a better execution. Going over things, This season really, or just the show in general, really does feel like a mess at times, but I wouldn't say I dislike it. I do have a lot of complaints to say, but I wouldn't say I dislike this season. As I said before, it has its moments. There are times where I feel like there definitely is stuff that has potential there, but overall, this just was not it. There was nothing really here worth checking out, at least for me personally. Maybe that might be different for somebody else, but this definitely didn't really sit right with me personally, so yeah. Leaving that be for now. If there's one more thing I'd like to talk about before we wrap up this review, the one thing I kind of want to talk about is the weirdness of Yuya getting everything kind of handed to him. Like, later on, it does show that he's improving himself and growing stronger, but he's literally just given the isekai door, which is fine in and of itself, that's fine, but then all of a sudden, overnight, he gains muscles, and then, literally, when he starts high school, right at the start of it, Kaori just shows up and is just like, hey, yeah, I can get you into my school, which, all of that really did sit right with me, but yeah, that's just something I wanted to quickly share that I was annoyed about, and yeah. That's all I really have to say, so we're at the conclusion of this video, and what are my final thoughts? This anime is not that good. I wouldn't say it's necessarily bad, but I wouldn't say it's that fantastic. There are some nice moments in here, but overall, I don't think I'd ever want to rewatch it again, and that's why I have to give I Got a Cheat Skill in Another World and Become Unrivaled in the Real World 2 a 5 out of 10. There were moments of enjoyment, but overall, felt like a complete mess that had a lot of potential that was wasted, and yeah. That's all we have to say, so thank you all for watching. If you're new to the JGC Anime channel, don't forget to subscribe. I also do anime fans to the channel, and I will see you all around. Peace!